Welcome to Jewish Life. I'm Suzy Kaufer. Thanks for joining us tonight. We have a very interesting guest with us and a wonderful show. We've been looking forward to having him on the air for some time, and I'd like to welcome Elihu Gevirtz.
Thank you so much, Suzy. It's nice to be here.
Thank you. Welcome. And Elihu is a rabbinical student in training to be a rabbi very soon, and I'm very interested in knowing what prompted that interest, and certainly a fascinating, wonderful thing to be doing. And he's also a professional biologist, and we've had quite a bit of experience with land and growing things and how that relates to Judaism, our wonderful tradition. So just wanted to start off with asking you what prompted you, what made you want to become a rabbi?
I've always been involved in Judaism from some way, from when I was a boy, and I remember my father, Olav Shalom, said to me in my early 20s, I think I was 21. I remember him. I can remember the scene, and he looked at me and he said, "You'd make a good rabbi."
Hmm.
And I was just more interested in other things at the time, and didn't pursue it. And then I had a daughter, and she grew up, and several times during the course of her growing up, she'd say, "Papa, you'd make a good rabbi." I was like, maybe. And then what happened was, I went to a teaching that a rabbi from LA was giving on a Shabbos afternoon here in Santa Barbara, and I was really fascinated with what he was teaching. I really liked it. And he was there with his wife, and his wife did some singing, and he did the teaching. And then afterwards, I stuck around, and I was talking or just listening to them. And the rabbi said something, and I went, I want to learn that. And he said, "Well, I'm teaching a class starting tomorrow. Why don't you come?" And I thought, okay. So the next day was Sunday, and I drove down to LA for the class, and I loved the class. Oh, this is great. I want to keep taking it. And this was at the rabbinic school. And then I was just going to go home. And I met a couple of the students that I really liked, and they said, "Well, we're doing this little meeting that we have to have, but then afterwards we're going to go out to dinner. Why don't you join us?" I said, "Okay, great." Went out to dinner with them. Really liked everybody. I thought, "These are great. Now I'm going to go home." And then one of them said, as we got back to the building, "Well, there's this other class. Why don't you sit in on that too?" I thought, okay. So I sat in on that class. I just completely loved it. And then I thought, you know what? This is it. It's like my soul just knew. It's kind of like when two people meet and it's a bashert kind of situation. It was like that with this school and these teachers. They were just so phenomenal and just incredible people and incredible teachings, and I just loved it. And I just knew that it was the right place, and I was about to embark on this path.
Wow, that's amazing. So it wasn't really something you necessarily planned for, thought about too much. It sort of pulled you in, it sounds
kind of pulled. I think it was God doing God's work. Yeah. And it just has always felt really, really right. Just really, really right. Even though it hasn't always been easy, but it's a great place to go to school and amazing teachers.
Wow, that's a great story. So how long does it actually take to become a rabbi in the school?
The school is called the Academy for Jewish Religion, and there's one here in California. There's another one with the same name in New York, and they're not affiliated. But it takes 5 years, and the breadth of study is pretty wide. There's a lot of things that we study and learn.
5 years is a long time.
It's a long time, and yet you walk out and you go, oh, there's so much more that, that I need to know. I'm reminded of a story of my father. He was a Torah scholar, and this is a story told to me by his nephew, so my cousin. So apparently when my dad got his PhD, and then he was back in New York walking with his nephew, and they were walking on the beach, and Ravi said, "Uncle Stanley, you have a PhD, you must know everything." And my father knelt down on one knee and picked up some sand and said, "This is how much I know." And that's the way I feel. That's the way I feel. There's so much more.
That's a good story. And I noticed part of your training is as a storyteller. You do some Hasidic stories, and I guess you've had that in the blood too for a while.
There's something about telling stories that is so effective. It reaches people somehow. I don't know much about brain physiology, but somehow, the rabbi can give a talk, and there are brilliant rabbis who give brilliant talks, and people really remember what he said. But it's the stories. It's the stories that can remain with a person for years, right? And you remember. It's like somehow we walk into the story with the storyteller, with the maggid is the Jewish word for it. And there's some really phenomenal stories.
Wow. Well, can I put you on the spot and ask you to tell us your favorite or one of your favorites? You have one in mind you might want to share?
There's so many. I'll tell you one.
Okay, great.
Okay. So I learned this from Shlomo Slowmo.
Can you tell us? I know who he is because I actually grew up in that neighborhood, but
okay.
New York. But tell us who he is, who he was.
Shlomo Olav Shalom was an Orthodox rabbi. Came from a long line of Orthodox rabbi from the Karliner line in Germany, and as a young boy he was born into Germany at when it was not a good time to be a Jew there. I don't know the story of how they came across, but anyway, he came to the U.S. and was quite a scholar, as well as at some point in the line picked up the guitar and learned the guitar and had a beautiful voice. And the story goes that the story within a story is that he and Reb Zalman were summoned in by the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and actually asked. This was, I think, in the early '60s. I'm not sure about that, but I think it was sometime in the '60s, and the Lubavitcher Rebbe asked Shlomo to go out and be a shaliach, to be a messenger out to Jews that were just kind of lost and weren't finding a way connection to Judaism, and to Zalman as well, just kind of a different, similar direction, just a different population that Zalman was directed towards. That's Zalman. So anyway, so Shlomo ended up going all around the world and teaching and giving concerts and writing hundreds or thousands of nigunim and melodies to prayers, and now his songs and his melodies are all over the world, and you can walk into many shuls around the world and you'll hear a Shlomo tune, and they're beautiful, and both his melodies and his stories, they touch my soul. They really touch my soul, and they're so powerful. And even though I never got the privilege of meeting him, I really consider him one of my teachers.
Wonderful.
So this is a story I learned from him.
Okay.
So there was a Rebbe who had a number of chassids sitting around his table as a Rebbe's tish. And this was a common thing, and the Rebbe was teaching, and the students were engaged. And all of a sudden, there's a knock on the door, and somebody comes in, and he's a little bit, he's hot, and he's sweaty, and he says, "I'm so sorry, Rebbe, to interrupt your tish, but I've come now. It's like a day and a half journey from my village down the road, and the reason that I came is that there's so many people that are sick in the village, and we don't know what's wrong, why people are getting sick, and they're not getting better. And so we're wondering if you could pray for them, if you or maybe one of your Hasidim could come and help us. Maybe if if you or one of your Hasidim came and said some prayers and maybe read some Tehillim, some Psalms, it would help." So the Rebbe says, "Of course, I'll send my favorite student. This is my favorite student. He'll go, and whatever you need." So the student gets up, packs his things, and goes. So they walk, and they walk, and they walk, and they walk, and it gets to be nightfall, and in the middle of the night, somewhere around 10, 11 o'clock at night, the wind picks up. They're walking through this field, and the dust starts blowing into their eyes and face, and it's really miserable, and it goes on for half an hour, and it goes on for 45 minutes, it goes on for an hour and a half, and finally, he can't stand it. Like, it's getting, like, all this grit is getting in his eyes and his ears. It's like, oh, it's horrible. He's like, "Wind, just stop already, wind." All of a sudden, the wind stops. The wind stops. He says, "Thank you," and he continues on the journey. So it's another half a day or so, and they finally get there late in the afternoon, and he indeed sees that people are really sick. So he says a Mishaberach for them, the healing prayer, and he sings some prayers with them, and he says Tehillim with each person, but they don't really seem to be getting better. So after a couple of days, he decides, okay, it's time to go back. So he makes his way back. It takes him a day and a half to get back. When he gets back to the Rebbe's cheder, the guard of the cheder, of the room, has his arm across the doorway. So in order to get in, and he doesn't move it, so in order to get in, the chassid has to bend down in order to get under the guard's arm. So he goes and he sits down and he takes his place. And he's accustomed to the Rebbe calling on him all the time and engaging him in conversation. The Rebbe didn't even look at him. Not once. Didn't call on him, didn't look at him. Like, his heart was just aching. He was practically in tears. He was in tears. So after the tish was over, he goes up to his Rebbe, who he loved so much and respected so much, and said, "Rebbe, what's wrong? I did what you asked. I went right away. I went to the village. It took me a day and a half. I went with the man. We sat, we said prayers, we read Tehillim, came back, and now you won't look at me, you didn't call me, like, what's wrong?" The Rebbe looked at him and said, "Wind." He said, "You told the wind to stop?" And he said, I asked Hashem to send that wind to blow away the dust that was causing that had some kind of disease that was causing the disease, causing the people's sickness. I asked Hashem to blow that wind to blow away the sickness from the village. And you, like, you thought that, like, the world revolves around you? You never know. Like, what's the purpose of something? What role does some event or some person in your life, or you, what role do you have? Like, I want you to, he says, I imagine what he says is, I want you to exercise some humility, like practice humility, and to be open to possibilities. Like, we don't always know what's really going on, what's the purpose, like what's really being sent by Hashem. And so we should all be blessed, that we should be open to the possibilities, humble enough to be open to that there might be, God's hand at work in the situation that we're in, and that we should be aware.
Oh, that's a great story. Very good story, and it leads us to our next topic about the land and your
Perfect.
involvement with the land and being so in touch with the land as a biologist. And we got some great pictures that we'll show about you being at Camp Ramah, doing farming with children and being very close with the land. You've had quite a bit of land conservancy and sustainable agriculture in your background. And how does that relate to Judaism? Was it talked about in the great book of our forefathers, or do they talk about how we're stewards of the land, or is that how you got into being closer to your Jewish heritage?
It's absolutely talked about in the Torah. We were shepherds, and then once we got into the land, we were farmers. And a lot of what's in the Torah has to do with how we relate to each other, how we relate to the land, how we relate to a stranger. In the story of creation in Breshit, it says you will till the land, but also that you will tend to it. In other words, you will work the land. You'll be farmers, but you're also going to care for it and guard it and protect it. In Kohelet Rabbah, it says, the earth is mine, meaning the earth is God's, and you have to take care of it, because if you don't, there'll be no one after you to also take care of it. And there are various passages throughout the Torah that indicate that really that the land belongs to Hashem and has to be taken care of. For example, there's a passage which says, the land is mine and you are only renters on the land, and therefore you cannot use it beyond, you can't sell it beyond reclaim. You can't, you're commanded to use it and to make a life, but you shouldn't use it in such a severe way that you damage it to the point of no return.
Sustainability,
absolutely, absolutely. And part of that sustainability package message that's in the Torah is also about taking care of those in need in the community. For example, it says in Leviticus, within the holiness code, right smack in the center of the Torah, that we have to leave the corners of our fields for the poor. That when you're gleaning, that if something drops, you're not allowed to pick it up, and that someone who's poor, who has nothing, or who's a widow, should be allowed to come and pick it up, like in the story of Ruth, for example. So there are many examples like that of where our relationship to God and our relationship to each other is exemplified, is illustrated, is made real in the agricultural world. And even though a lot of us are not farmers anymore, those lessons still apply. So even if we're city dwellers and we don't have a farm, we still can perform the mitzvah of leaving the corners of the field by donating some tzedakah or donating time or finding a way of taking care of those people who are in need in our community.
That's wonderful. It's a great lesson there. And when you work with children at Ramah, and when you do the actual physical gardening with them, are you instilling some of these stories and values from Torah as well?
Absolutely. We often will spend, you referred to Camp Ramah, which is where I'm farming right now. I, along with a bunch of kids of various ages, created the camp's first ever organic garden, a large garden. We did it in the shape of a large menorah, a 7-branched menorah.
Wow.
Each I think I gave you a picture that you'll see.
Yeah, we'll show that.
Yeah, and so each branch of the menorah is a garden bed. It's about 40 feet long, and we planted different things in it: tomatoes, lettuce, green beans, basil, garlic, and it was so much fun. And the kids really loved the menorah, and people loved seeing it. And so we would do a little lesson, like we'd open up the Torah and just spend a few minutes, learning and discussing, like the thing about leaving the corners of the field. And so we did that, like we opened up to Leviticus and read it, and then went, okay, now how are we going to do this here? Because it's away from the road. There's no widows or orphans that are going to come by. So how can we perform this mitzvah? So we talked about different options and decided that we would bring it to a local food bank in Ojai, and we also would bring some to Sova, which is a food bank in Los Angeles. And one of the things that we did with the kids was that I went and got some olive oil, some kosher olive oil at the store, and then we picked herbs from the garden, put them in glass, had the kids do the picking, and put them in the glass jars, covered it with olive oil, and then the olive oil picked up the flavor of the herbs from the garden, and then we gave those to the local food bank as well. And they really loved it.
Wow, that's a great lesson in farming and Judaism and combining that. And was that kind of your idea, or had they done that before?
The gardening?
Mm-hmm. The Menorah Garden.
Oh, the idea of the garden I had suggested, and they had probably talked about before. There's a large orchard on the property. The idea of the menorah came from a group called the Amir Project that's working on creating gardens with kind of a social justice theme at a variety of camps around North America. So the idea came, it wasn't necessarily a menorah, it was just some kind of Jewish theme. And so I thought, well, a menorah is perfect because it has symbolism and it's deep and rich and old in our tradition, and it also works well in terms of creating a garden.
Wow, that's really nice. Are you planning on doing more of that in Santa Barbara, or are you planning on doing that program here?
Well, I'm working on a proposal right now. Camp Ramah has retained me to create kind of a vision document of what this project would look like to do it on a year-round basis. Right now it's a summer camp, and then they have weekend retreats and things like that. But this would be a year-round program where we would do farming, we would, both in the garden and the orchard, and we would possibly, we'd plant as many of the 7 species of Israel as we could. I think we can do 6 out of the 7.
They grow really well in Ojai, all of them.
You're right.
Grow,
yeah, all of them except for dates, I think. I don't think we can grow dates, but
okay.
all the rest of them. And because we're at about the same latitude as Israel is. And so part farming and part ecology, where we'd go on nature walks and I'd teach about the ecosystem and the plants and the animals and their adaptations, and then weaving Torah through all of it, as well as doing some kind of personal spiritual development for the kids. And so we're working on this proposal together, me and Camp Ramah, and what we're hoping to do is to get some seed funding to get it going, to get it started, and I think after a few years that it should be able to carry itself. So we're just looking for some initial angel funding in that regard. But I was there today working, harvesting, and also getting a new bed ready for planting, and so I brought you some stuff.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
I was thinking about Ojai. I've spent quite a bit of time there myself.
There you go.
Wow, squash.
Squash.
My favorite. Thank you.
And a cucumber.
Beautiful.
And here are some tomatoes.
Oh,
And this
lovely.
are very nice.
Beautiful. Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome. You're welcome.
Got my stir fry all ready for.
Oh, and here's a
Wow, and this
patty.
all came from your
all came from the garden.
beautiful Torah garden.
Yeah. And so I'll be
Lovely. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And I'll be delivering some to the food bank in LA tomorrow. Yeah.
Very, very beautiful. So let's move from plants to animals, since
Okay,
we're all
okay.
they're all on the table here. And I had the privilege of being able to be part of the ceremony and the beautiful high holidays, and I got to witness and be part of your special shofar blowing, and I was very moved by it, and it seemed like you had a very deep dimension of what was going on there with the blowing, not just playing an instrument. And we only have a couple of minutes left, but if you could talk about what you were thinking about, well, as you prepare to blow the shofar, perhaps blow for us.
Sure.
To close out, that would be wonderful.
Sure. Well, just briefly, really the preparation began a month earlier at the beginning of Elul, and I would meditate and pray about it and really ask to be a servant of Hashem in the blowing of the shofar, and that I really be a vehicle, a vessel for God's will, and then so when I actually, in the moments preceding walking up there, and then when I'm actually up there, I actually said a prayer that I asked for, like, that all of everybody's prayers in the room and for all the prayers of all the Jewish people throughout the world be able to be lifted up through the sound of the shofar and reach all the way to heaven, where the gates would be open and all of our prayers would be received.
That certainly worked for me.
Thank you so much.
Thank
So
you.
would you like to?
Yes, now would be a great time.
Okay.